couple of videos I'm going to make myself a Cedar Wood Hot Tub together with a wood-fired water heater to go with it. So that will be split across the two videos. A lot of people, after they've seen the videos, ask me, do I have the plans available? So what I've done for these videos is I've written a booklet which is going to be widely available, and you can see where you can get it from at the bottom of the screen now. Now for this project we do have the most enormous pile of wood to get through. I did a bit of searching on the internet, and various manufacturers reckon to use different types of wood in order to do this. However, the traditional wood is Western red cedar, so that's what I bought. I think the people who are trying to tell you they should use other things, it's purely a cost-cutting measure. I've never used Western red cedar before, but apparently it has very good water resistance properties with a straight long grain. So perfect for what we're trying to do. So for this project I've purchased 23 metre lengths, each one 150mm by 50mm, or 6x2 if you like it in old money. The first part of the project is to make the base for the tub. I'm making the base of my tub 1.5 metres across. So I've cut this first piece of wood to 1.6, so I've got a little bit of room to play with at either end. And then I've used one of these. They call them tramelins, and they fit in this case onto an old ruler, and you can use them for scribing big circles. So I'm going to do this end and this end, and that comes to 1.48. So if I cut the next piece to 1.5, so then I can put this piece here and then I'll extend the circle around, and you can see that way I minimise the amount of waste. So you can now see what I was trying to get to. So I've ended up cutting 10 pieces of wood, although I've only got 5 of them shown here, slightly shorter, and all the cutting lengths are to be found on the website in the cutting list. Now obviously all these bits of wood are in their sawn state, and I don't want to leave them like that. What I want to end up with is pieces of wood which are 150mm wide, and I'd quite like to get it down to 35mm thickness. So I'm now going to spend a little bit of time milling some wood down. Some of this will go through the bandsaw and then it will go through the planer. So now I'm going to start putting it all together, and I am going to put some glue. Having got it like this, I'm just going to cramp these together. Now I'm just going to slip these couple of bits of paper underneath, which is where the cramp and the glue coincide, because obviously glue, not obvious at all, but if you've not come across it before, glue does react with iron, and you end up with a nasty black mark. So if you put a little bit of paper underneath, and then we'll just leave that to dry for an hour or so. As you can see, I've now turned it over. I'm going to fix a couple of battens on the back. Now in doing this, I'm using stainless steel screws. Standard steel screws would react against the cedar and give very big black marks. So to keep it nice and clean, I'm using stainless steel. So having glued everything together, then it's time to mark it up with our circle. Now I have measured ever so carefully, and it is 1.5 metres from side to side, but that's really not leaving any room for error. So what I've done is I've reduced the size of the tub to 1.48, and then that means I can guarantee that I can cut a perfect circle all the way around. Now when you mark this out and cut it, it's important that you work as accurately as you can. When you do the mathematics in a minute to work out how many pieces of wood you're going to have coming up for the sides, it's important to know exactly what the circumference of this circle is. We'll work out the circumference, if you remember from your school days, pi r squared, although these days it's much easier to use a calculator to do it. Now I'm going to spend a little bit of time now with the belt sander getting this as smooth as I can. Whilst no one is really going to be able to get to see this, you will feed it with your feet. So you want it absolutely splinter free and as smooth as it's possible to get. Well, here we are, that's had a good sanding. And if you wanted, you could stop at that. You'd probably make yourself a fairly decent round tabletop. But we're not going to stop there. This is now going to be the base of our hot tub. I'm not going to do anything else to it. I'm not going to seal it. I'm not going to do anything, because once it gets underwater, we want the water to be able to sink into it, and that will cause all the joints and things to swell, and that helps the waterproofing of it all. Now that we've got the base made, let me see if I can explain the mathematics of it all. We know the diameter of this base is 1.48 metres, and the diameter is from one side all the way through to the other side. That makes the radius being from the point in the centre to the edge, 74 centimetres. This is one of the bits of wood that we're going to use for the sides, and you probably could rest it on the side there, but you'd end up with quite a gap. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a groove in here, which is 10 millimetres deep times the width of the base. And so this will then be rebaited onto the edge like that. That reduces the size of the inside of the circle by 10 millimetres either side. So our inside circle becomes 1.46 metres. So the radius becomes 73 centimetres. Now, using that well-known mathematical formula, which I'm sure you remember from school, pi r squared, and if you can't remember how to do it, if you look on Google, you'll find there's some marvellous ready reckoners and calculators, because what we need to know is what the circumference is, what the measurement all the way around the outside. If you use one of these calculators, you will discover that a circle with a radius of 73 centimetres has a circumference of 4.586 metres. I've now milled all these bits of wood, which are going to be for the outside staves. Now at the moment, this is 1 metre long, it's about 145 millimetres wide, and it's 36 millimetres across here. Now I'm going to cut this into 70 millimetre widths. So I end up with a piece like this. Now, if you take the circumference of the circle, which is 4.58, and you divide it by 70 millimetres, you discover that I'm going to make 65 of these. Now, if I get 2 of these and put them next to each other, you'll see that if I cut them square, then I end up with a little bit of a gap. It doesn't fit very well. So what I need to do is to cut an angle on one edge of one of these. So on here, one edge is square and one edge is cut at an angle. And what you need to know is what that angle is. And this is where we go back to our mathematics, because we know that we want to make these 70 millimetres wide. We know that we're going to have 65 of them all the way around, because we've already done that sum. We know that a circle is 360 degrees, so if we divide 360 by the number of staves that we're going to have, in this case 65, you end up with an angle of 5.5 degrees. So what I need to do is to cut these 70 millimetres wide with a flat angle on one side and a 5.5 degree angle on the other side. And then if my mathematics is correct, that should all fit together ever so nicely around the edge. It all sounds far too simple, and I'm sure it'll go terribly wrong. But in principle, that's what's going to happen. So let's see if we can do it. As you can see, I've tilted the table of the bandsaw by 5.5 degrees, and I've set the fence that it's 70 millimetres from the edge of the blade to the edge of the fence, and then I should be able to cut exactly the piece that I want. Now, if you haven't got a bandsaw like this, I'm sure you could do this on a table saw. Now, the downside of this project is you've got so many bits of wood to cut. I've got 65 of these staves, plus I've done a couple of spares. I've actually got 67. So every operation you have to do 67 times. So here I am, I'm getting ready, well, I'm starting to cut the grooves. So I've marked 25mm up from the end. So as you can see, I marked up 25mm up from the end. I did another 32mm beyond that, and then I've marked on the edges here 10mm, and I've cut it out with a tenon saw. Well, we've reached the final process on dealing with the staves. I spent the whole of yesterday machining them, cutting them to size, cutting the edges, sanding them, cutting the rebates, everything. As a consequence, I spent the whole day with a pair of ear defenders on, and I felt quite cut off from the world. It was a very strange day, but I'm delighted to say that all the machinery has stopped. So the last process is I'm just treating what will be the outside of the staves with linseed oil. I want the water to soak into the wood ever so slightly. It will cause the fibres in the wood to swell, and that will take up the slack in any gaps that there may be. Remember, you can find out all the projects that I'm up to by looking at the blog, which is tomgreencraft.com. Or if you don't like that, you can find me on Facebook as Thomas Green. Finally, the moment of truth has arrived, when we actually start to fit the staves to the base. You can see I've got the base perched very precariously on these trestles. Now, I deliberately cut these very tight. But what I want to do is fit these in and get them fairly tight together. So it's just a question of going around, banging them all in place. You can start to see across here our 5-degree angle. Now when you see it like this, you realise just how big this tub is. No wonder it's taken so long to cut all the sides. Remarkably, the maths worked out exact. It said I was going to need 65.5 sections, and that's pretty much what I've needed, 65, and I've had to cut one in half here. Now the easiest way to hold this together so what we need to do now is to make a couple of steel bands. We're going to make 3 of them to go around the edge of this. So again, mathematics has worked out quite nicely for us. So we'll do the same again. This time the diameter is 1.51. So if we halve that in order to get the radius, it's 755, if my maths is correct. So I'm going to use this very clever calculator you can get on the web. If we tap all those figures into the calculator, we end up with a circumference of 4,743 millimetres. Now, I need to leave a little bit of wiggle room here as well, so I can take off the 43 millimetres, so we'll make this band 4,700 millimetres long. So that's the next job, we'll start making the bands. Now what I've done now is I've now put the first of what will be 3 bands around the outside of the tub. Well, here we are, a momentous moment. We've got it turned the right way up, and you can actually start to see the size of the thing. At the end of the day, it's just a very large wooden bucket, but by heck, it is a very large wooden bucket. Now what we'll do is when we get the 3rd band in place, I'll try and get these absolutely smooth, get it in place, and then we can tighten it all up, and that will hold that all together, and I don't think that's going anywhere. I'm delighted to say the structure of the tub is now finished. I want to put some seats in. The idea is that the when you sit in the tub, then you want to get the water level up to about there. So this is obviously far too deep for that, so I'm going to put a couple of seats, I'm going to put some seats all the way around the inside, and there's a bit of basic plumbing to do. But before I do any of that, I think I'm just going to take a belt sander along the top here just to get this a little bit smoother than it is at the moment, and then we're ready to move on. Well, the last job before we put this into place is to install the plumbing, or some of the plumbing anyway. So I have this tank connector here. I've drilled a hole in the bottom. This will be the outlet for the water. So it will go from here off to the water heater, and then when this is in place we'll then put another hole somewhere up here, and this will be the return coming from the hot water heater coming back in at a much higher level. So cold water goes out at the bottom, hot water comes in at the top. So you can now see at the bottom here we've got a little bit of pipe coming through. We'll put a 90-degree bend on there, and then the pipe can go off in that direction. So all we've got to do now is manoeuvre this into place, part of which will involve taking it down the road on a trolley. So I think I'm about to make a lot of motorists' day. So now you can see how it all comes together. So this is the pipe that comes from the bottom of the tub, goes up through the back of the heater, and then we'll have another one that comes from the heater to go into the tub. You will also see I've put a tap here. This is the lowest point of the pipe work, which means we'll be able to drain the tub when we need to. So here we are, what is going to be a momentous moment, the first time we actually put some water in the tub. Now, despite the fact I've got all these joints as close as I can, inevitably there's going to be a few little gaps. And so what you do is you put some water in it for a couple of days, and that allows the wood to swell, and that will close up all the gaps, and then once the gaps are closed, then you can fill it up all the way. Well, here we are. This is the culmination of the whole project. Our water heater has been on for 4 or 5 hours now, and it's heated up the water a treat. As you can see, I now have a steaming hot tub. You've no idea how much I've been looking forward to this. I have to say, this is about as good as it gets. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.